the early 90s, my girlfriend and I were looking for a church close to Michigan State that we could attend, and someone told us about this crazy church that met in the Kellogg Center, and so we decided to give it a try, and we came to this very room, the auditorium at the Kellogg Center, and we came to our first Riverview service. And here were two things that we loved. We loved music that engaged with our lives. This just felt like us. And then we loved the teaching straight from the scriptures. We had found our church home at Riverview. In 1995, my wife and I got married, and we had these big plans to plant a church one day. Riverview's heartbeat was one of church planting, and we wanted to be part of it. And so we're looking at big cities, Toronto and Boston and Chicago, and dreaming about where we might plant a church. A friend of mine challenged me. He said, listen, you could go plant one church now, or you could stay at Riverview and plant 100 before you die, with all these young people coming around. And man, that was tough. My wife and I wrestled through this because we were planning on planting a church in a big urban area, and here we were in Lansing, Michigan.
So I first met Noel at a high school leadership conference in South Carolina. He was putting the conference on, and I was leading the worship. And we just had the synergy that worked well together. We did this a couple years in a row, and I remember telling my wife, if I ever got the chance to work more with that guy, I would totally take it. And I guess he was feeling the same way, because in a couple years, Riverview was looking to hire someone on to do music stuff. And so he asked me if I wanted the job. And the idea was that I would take the job, raise up some leaders, and then the two of us would go out and plant a church. I said, yes, absolutely, I'm on board.
One of the most difficult conversations I ever had to have was with Dan Price, to tell him that I wasn't going on a church plant. He was welcome to go if he wanted, but my wife and I, we were going to stay here.
And so for me, honestly, it wasn't too hard of a decision to decide to stay as well. Seeing what God was doing, seeing the potential for church plants, for venue plants, for all these lives to be changed. I talked to my wife, and we're like, yeah, we're in here for the long haul. We want to stay. We want to see God do this through Riverview.
Church planting has always been in the DNA of Riverview, and that's why it's so exciting to see all that God has done over the last several years. I mean, a couple of years ago, we helped start a church in Detroit. In a place where everyone else is going out, we sent some guys in. Last year, through our church planting residency program, we started a church in Pittsburgh and helped start a location for another church in Chicago. This next year, we're helping to start a church north of Flint and one on the east side of Grand Rapids. And there's another half a dozen church planters in the queue right now, because there are 10 million people in the state of Michigan, and a large number of them need to hear the gospel message of Jesus. But it's not just the 10 million around the state. There's 425,000 people in the greater Lansing area. And so our dream is that over the next 5 years, we'd like to start 5 more venues to help reach those people for Jesus.
So now one of my roles is to help venues get started in the Lansing area. I'm just so excited about taking the momentum that God has given us here at Riverview and applying that to different contexts in and around Lansing. And so I'm just excited to see what God's going to do through Riverview over the next 35 years.
You know, it's wild to be back in this auditorium and to remember that just 11 years ago, this is where we met. I mean, there's only like 250-ish seats in here, and we barely filled half of these seats. And now to see all that God has been doing, the fact that we moved out to Holt, and then we built a bigger building, and then we built a bigger building, and then we started something back on the campus of Michigan State again. And just to think that in 35 years, God has done all of this. Can you imagine what God is going to do through Riverview over the next 35 years?